Hello everyone, it's Scott and we're back with the top 15 uncommons from Bloomburrow. So on Monday we put out our top 10 list for mythic rares. On Tuesday our top 15 list for rares from the set. And today we're going to be talking about the top 15 uncommons from Bloomburrow. But before we get started with our list, remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Do all the YouTube things because that'll help grow our channel and get content like this out to more people. So let's dive into our top 15 uncommons. So first is Flowerfoot Swordmaster for a white mana. You get a Mouse Soldier. That's a 1/2 with Offspring of 2, and you may pay an additional 2 mana as you cast this spell. If you do, when this creature enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 token copy of it. It has Valiant, and whenever this creature becomes a target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, mice you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So if you can consistently target Flowerfoot Swordmaster with an ability or a spell, then you're going to buff up your team every single turn, allowing them to attack in for more damage. And I think that's good enough at the 1-drop spot for playability in a mouse deck in Standard. Coming in at number 14, I have Plume Creed Escort for 1 and a blue mana. You get a Bird Scout. That's a 2/1 with Flash and Flying. And when Plume Creed Escort enters the battlefield, target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. So very simple card where we're playing it probably at flash speed, and we're going to protect one of our creatures by giving it hexproof when we bring it into play. So I think any blue deck has a place for this, potentially in Standard. Next, we've got at number 13, Fireglass Mentor for a black and a red mana. You get a 2/1, that's a Lizard Warlock. And at the beginning of your second main phase, if an opponent lost life this turn, exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one of them until end of turn. You may play that card. So fantastic ability on Flameglass Mentor. We already know there's likely to be a Lizard deck in Standard, and because of that, this seems like a perfect card to put in. You play it, and maybe on the first turn you don't get to look at 2 cards from it, but probably the second turn and thereon, you're going to be able to look at an additional card and be able to play that on that turn every single time. And I think that's a really powerful ability that's going to help that Lizard deck immensely in Standard be more difficult for your opponents to beat. Coming in at number 12, we have Rabbit Gnaw for 1 and a red mana. You get an instant, and target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Then it deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. So this is Rabbit Bite, but in red and at instant speed. So you play this in the Prowess deck. You buff up your creature by giving it +1, really +2/+1 when you play this, and then you get to fight a creature on the other side by dealing damage to it, hopefully taking it out and making it easier for you to get in your next attack. And I think that makes it very playable in Standard as part of one of the Prowess decks that we're seeing, and might even see play in other types of decks as well. At number 11, we have Seasoned Warden Guard for a white mana. You get a Rabbit Warrior. That's a 1/2. So good on rate, 1-drop. And whenever Seasoned Warden Guard attacks while you control a token, Seasoned Warden Guard gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And we know there are multiple cards in Standard that are going to help you to create tokens. So because of that, I think this is very easily a 3/2 when you're attacking, and that's going to make it more difficult for your opponent in combat to trade with it. And I think because of that, this is definitely a key piece to our Rabbit deck in Standard. Next, we've got Repel Calamity for 1 and a white mana. You get an instant where you get to destroy target creature with power or toughness 4 or greater. And that's why I think this card is going to be playable in standard, because it doesn't matter if the power or the toughness is 4, just one of the two has to be that. And because of that, I think this is an easy include in sideboards, and it might be main deckable as well in standard. Coming in at number 9, we have Hop to It for 2 and a white mana. You get a sorcery, and you get to create 3 1/1 rabbit creature tokens. So easily worth the rate here, 3 tokens for 3 mana. And it also, again, triggers other abilities of cards already in the rabbit deck, like we just talked about. So I think this is an easily played card in those rabbit decks. At number 8, we have Thoughtstalker Warlock for 2 and a black mana. You get a Lizard Warlock. That's a 2/2 with Menace. And when Thoughtstalker Warlock enters the battlefield, choose target opponent. If they lost life this turn, they reveal their hand. You choose a non-land card from it, and they discard that card. Otherwise, they discard a card. So we get a great on-rate card here. 3 mana, 2/2 with Menace, and your opponent is going to either discard a card or it becomes a Thoughtseize for you without the downside of losing 2 life. So I think that easily makes it playable in standard, and it's the right type. It's a lizard. We know there's going to be a lizard deck in standard, so I think this is a couple of copies of that are going to be part of that deck, because that ability to, in the early to mid game, go ahead and take the best card your opponent has, I think is more than standard playable. At number 7, we've got one of the villages from the set, and this is Rockface Village. It's a land. It can add colorless mana, or you can add red mana to spend only on casting a creature spell, or you can pay 1 and target lizard, mouse, otter, or raccoon you control gets +1/+0 and gains haste until the end of the turn, and you activate it only as a sorcery. So this is, I think, of the village cycle, the most important one for standard, because the ability to, in essence, pay 2 mana to give a creature haste, give it +1, I think is more than playable in standard. And if you're playing, say a big raccoon style deck and you've got a couple extra mana laying around, now you can go ahead and give one of those creatures haste and that +1, and I think that's good enough to see standard play over the course of Bloomburrow season and beyond. Number 6 is Burrow Guard Mentor for a green and a white mana. You get a rabbit soldier with trample, and Burrow Guard Mentor's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control. So Burrow Guard Mentor not only goes in a rabbit deck, it could go in the soldiers deck if the soldiers deck went into green, or it can just go into a generic creature deck or a generic token deck. And why this is so good is it has trample. Bunnycorn, which is a card that basically does the exact same thing, only gets the power buff for each creature. It doesn't have trample, and that's why that card, even though it's a really good magic card, hasn't seen a tremendous amount of play in standard. But I think going forward in the rabbit deck, both of those cards are going to see play, and I think we'll be looking for other abilities as well that are going to support our rabbit theme in standard. Next, at number 5, we've got Feed the Cycle for 1 and a black mana. You get an instant, and as an additional cost to cast the spell, you can either forage or play a black mana. To forage, exile 3 cards from your graveyard or sacrifice a food, and you get to destroy target creature or planeswalker. At a minimum, I think Feed the Cycle is a sideboard card, because we know with the rotation that's occurring, we're losing a lot of the planeswalkers that we're seeing play in standard. So the planeswalker aspect of this, I think, makes it a sideboard card, but this could be main deckable as well. It's a hero's downfall, if nothing else. And because of that, I think this is going to definitely see standard playability. Coming in at number 4, we've got Flame Cash Gecko for 1 and a red mana. You get a Lizard Warlock, that's a 2/2, another one of the quality lizards from the set. And when Flame Cash Gecko enters the battlefield, if an opponent lost life this turn, you get to add a black and a red mana to your mana pool. And for 1 and a red mana, you can discard a card and draw a card. So this is a fantastic card because we know that the Lizard deck in Standard is going to be in Rakdos colors, and you could use this anywhere really, as long as your opponent is going to be losing life. And that additional mana, even though it's only going to be once, is really important to that style of deck that wants to go quickly. And maybe you play this on turn 2 and you're able to get in with a 1-drop and deal damage to your opponent, and then you can either use the rummage ability on it, or you can probably play another 2-drop at that point and have a number of creatures on the field, and that's going to make it a lot harder for your opponent if you're playing multiple creatures early in the game on a turn that they weren't really expecting it. And I think that's why Flame Cash Gecko is definitely Standard playable. And because an opponent just has to lose life, I think that's good enough to play generically in Standard to get that additional 2 mana. Next, at number 3, we've got Vine Reap Mentor for a black and a green mana. You get a Squirrel Druid, that's a 3/2. And when Vine Reap Mentor enters the battlefield or dies, you get to create a food token. So I think this is a card that's going to be easily included in the Golgari deck that's already in Standard. It's kind of looking for another 2-drop to help it out, and I think this is a very good one because at a minimum you're getting 2 foods for 2 mana, and I think that's certainly good enough in Standard. But a 2 mana 3/2, that's going to trade with a lot of things in Standard. So this is a card I feel is going to see serious play over the course of the next 3 years. Coming in at number 2, we've got Eddie Merc Crab for 5 and 2 blue mana. You get a 5/5 elemental crab with flash, and this spell costs 1 less to cast for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. Eddie Merc Crab enters tapped if it's not your turn, and when Eddie Merc Crab enters, tap up to 2 target creatures. So if you're playing it for its flash ability, you're probably tapping down 2 of your opponent's creatures when you play this to potentially open up the battlefield for you to attack through on the next turn, or you're playing it to prevent your opponent from attacking with a couple of creatures. And I think that's a powerful ability. And we already know the ability here to reduce its cost by 1 for each instant and sorcery spell is very reachable in blue decks as it is. The Mono Blue Tempo deck is using Tolarian Terror, which basically has the same ability set on it. So this is going to cost you 1 specific blue mana more, but I think that's not a problem. So I think the high-gen Tolarian Terror deck just adds 4 of these, and now you've got 12 really good cards, and then it's figuring out what else you're going to work with that to get these things onto the field well ahead of schedule and beat your opponent accordingly. All right, coming in at number 1, we have Fell for a colorless and a black mana. You get a sorcery with no restrictions on it, simply destroy target creature. Now, it is a sorcery, so you can only do it on your turn, but Fell is certainly the best removal spell from the set, and maybe one of the best removal cards we've seen in a very long time, because typically the removal spells that cost 2 mana have some kind of restriction on them, like Go for the Throat, you can't kill artifact creatures, okay? And we got a couple from the last few sets that, you know, you pay some life, you discard a card. So because of that, I think Fell, just because it's simple, very straightforward, destroy a creature, best card at the uncommon level in Bloomburrow. Thanks for staying to the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed our Bloomburrow previews. This is our last one. And please remember, to like and subscribe and leave a comment what you thought was your favorite uncommon card from the set. And I will be back during Bloomburrow season with some gameplay videos that I will have for you. And I've put on the screen for you our top 10 mythic rare video and our top 15 rare video for you to take a look at if you haven't had a chance to already. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks. I'll see you next time.